As the sun moves toward the horizon, there is a certain magic in opening up the observatory and getting everything ready to go for the night. Because the sky overhead is filled with marvels and endless things to wonder at. And revealing them is just a matter of pointing a telescope and a camera and having some patience. The amazing structures to be found in the night sky, such as nebulae, galaxies, and star clusters, are so dim that they can take many hours to shoot. And for myself, it's not unusual that I will spend on average 10 to 20 hours to shoot a moderately dim DSO, or deep sky object, and 20 to 40 hours to shoot dimmer DSOs. But whatever the image that we shoot, noise is always the enemy. And I think, for many astrophotographers and astronomers, apart from light pollution, noise is probably the most significant enemy of all. Especially if you're trying to produce an image that is not just accurate for scientific purposes, but also as beautiful as possible. Noise quickly and easily gets in the way of that. In the old days of astrophotography, noise was dealt with by adding more and more integration, and very basic denoising tools which, to put simply, added just a little bit of blur, trying to blur out that background noise and, to one degree or another, smooth out those regions of an image where noise might appear. And this meant that trying to deal with that noise could be as destructive to the image as the noise itself, because if you push those denoising tools too hard, you would end up undermining the quality of the fine detail within your image. Fortunately, with the advent of non-generative AI-based denoising tools, we have a better way. But the tools, all by themselves, are not a solution. Developing good astrophotography I find to be like playing a musical instrument. It's not enough to have the instrument in your hands, and it's not even enough to understand music theory. One must have a technique. And over the years, I've devised some techniques that I find pretty much obliterate noise. It's really quite simple, and today I'm going to share it with you. Step 1. Integration, integration, and more integration. Integration equals information, and a lack of information is the playground of noise. So the foundation for defeating noise is to build up as much integration time as is required to properly portray both the DSO and the surrounding space. I went a bit into this topic in my previous video, how much integration is enough. Now, there are no hard and fast numbers to know when exactly you have enough integration, because the reality is, the longer you point your telescope and camera at a DSO, the more information you're going to gather. And that means more detail in the way of color and fine structure you're going to be able to resolve, and the more noise is going to disappear in the overwhelming information. If you were to keep your telescope pointed at a single DSO all night, you'd get a good image. But if you were to keep it pointed on there for 2 nights, you'd get a better image. And if you would keep the telescope pointed at that DSO for 1,000 nights, you would get a still better image. Now there is a diminishing return here. The longer you remain trained on a single DSO, the less improvements of the image you're going to see per time spent on the image. But experience has taught me that the really outstanding quality of an image is in that fine, almost unnoticeable detail. More and more time brings out finer and finer structure and more subtle variations of color. But for our purposes here, more and more time adds more information to the image, making noise less and less of an issue as it's drowned out by signal. In my own astrophotography, I use 2 straightforward rules to determine if I have enough integration time. One is, I look at professional images to see what's there and I don't stop until I've revealed that. And there is the flip side of that same rule. If I see hints of further information in a DSO, like if I ram up the histogram very high and see some additional structure that was previously invisible beginning to appear within that grossly rammed up histogram, then I will simply continue adding integration time. And the other principle is I just look at the space. Once the space appears clear and noise-free, then I know I have enough integration time. Ultimately, integration time is the foundation for defeating noise. More integration time equals a less noisy image. Now let's take a moment to consider denoising tools and technique and how to use them. There are a lot of good denoising tools out there, both free and paid. However, my favorite one, hands down, is RC Astro's Noise Exterminator. I know it's a little pricey, but the way I look at it, if you're going to spend a couple $1,000s on a telescope and a couple $1,000s between a camera and a filter wheel and that much more again on a mount, you might as well drop $100 for good denoising software. And the noise exterminator, I think, is one of the best investments for improving your astrophotography you can possibly make. Now, a lot of RC Astro tools require PixInsight, but the noise exterminator can run as a plugin in either Photoshop or Affinity Photo. Perhaps some other tools too, like GIMP, I'm not sure. But I can absolutely guarantee you that it runs just fine in Affinity Photo because I use it in Affinity Photo as part of my denoising process. Now, I use 3 applications for developing and denoise in 4 places during that process. I begin developing in PixInsight. I use the weighted batch preprocessor in it to stack. And since I am usually shooting in LRGB, I then open up the 4 masters that are the outputs of that stacking, run the blur exterminator, star align them, apply the linear fit color balancing tool to the RG and B masters, and then combine the RG and B masters. Now, this is a fairly sophisticated process. There are a number of steps, and if you want to learn more about it, please take a look at my playlist, Image Processing Complete Workflow. But where I do my first denoising happens now, after I have combined the RG and B channels. At this point, I'm going to develop 3 types of images, applying the noise exterminator separately on each of those types. The first thing I'm going to do is clone the RGB information, and the clone is going to be used to make a star plate. PixInsight's screen transfer function does a very good job balancing starlight, so I'm going to permanently apply the screen transfer function stretching of the histogram to the new clone. This is done by dragging the icon that looks like a triangle on its side from the screen transfer function tool to the histogram transformation tool, hovering over the histogram transformation tool's own icons until you see an hourglass appear and then releasing it. It's a little tedious because there's a very small area in there where you're going to see the hourglass shape. Now, the histogram transformation tool is set with the screen transfer function's histogram transformation, and I'll drag the histogram transformation tool's action icon onto the clone. The clone will become entirely whited out because now it has the screen transfer function applied to it twice, so I'll hit F12 to remove the temporary application of the screen transfer function from the image, leaving only the permanent histogram transformation. And this gives us well-balanced stars, and it's at this point that I'm going to run the noise exterminator on the clone. The noise exterminator will clean up the image, and then I'll run the star exterminator and extract a denoised star plate. This will be added back into the image later on. A viewer recently asked me, why would I bother denoising stars? And it's a good question. By nature, stars themselves are pretty bright, ergo light rich, ergo noise poor. However, stars are not just bright pixels on the image. They tend to appear, unless they are small and dim, as a little cluster of pixels of varying brightness and often with a haze around them. And it's in that haze in particular where some noise can appear. So by running the noise exterminator before running the star exterminator, you can be sure that any possibility for noise to appear in those hazes is cleaned up. Now I'm going to go back to the original RGB combined image. And first thing, before the image's histogram is even stretched, I'm going to run the star exterminator. This time, turning off the option to generate a star plate. The star exterminator runs best on linear or unstretched information, so you'll get a slightly better starless outcome that way. Once the star exterminator has run, I'll stretch the histogram using the histogram transformation tool and applying the theory that I covered in my video, perfect histograms in 60 seconds evolved. In almost all cases, unless an object is very unusual, this will stretch the histogram in a way that is ideal for development in applications outside of PixInsight because, to be honest, as I've said in many previous videos, I really do not care for PixInsight as an image editor, and to be entirely frank, I just don't edit in it. The noise exterminator should only be used after an image's histogram has been stretched. The noise exterminator is made to work best that way. While you can theoretically run the noise exterminator on an unstretched image, it's likely to produce artifacts. Then I'll move on to the luminance master, and I'll use a very similar process there. I'll first run the star exterminator on it, then stretch the histogram using the evolved method that I mentioned a moment ago, and then run the noise exterminator. The denoised star plate and the RGB and separate L starless plates are then exported as lossless TIFFs to next be edited in a layer-based non-destructive photo editor. In my case, that's Affinity Photo. In Affinity Photo, I'll go through my usual development procedure, which is to break the information from the starless plates up into their high and low frequency components, sharpen the high frequency information and adjust the light and color of the low frequency information, then recombine those components and composite them together. And once again, if you want to learn about that, please take a look at that playlist I mentioned earlier, Image Processing Complete Workflow. Now I'll take the developing as far as I can in Affinity Photo, using its various sharpening tools synergistically. These are the Unsharp Mask, the Clarity tool, and the High Pass filter to improve that sharpness, and using the levels tool in particular to bring out the color and brightness, while constricting the appearance of unwanted things such as perhaps stray moonlight. And when I've pushed that development as far as I can, then I merge all the visible layers, with the exception of the star plates, into a single new pixel layer, and run the noise exterminator on that new pixel layer. This is necessary because the process of development involves further brightening the image in some places, enhancing color in some places, and increasing sharpness in the high-frequency information, and this can bring out any lingering traces of noise that may have remained in the masters. By running the noise exterminator once again, that noise is extracted, and this is absolutely necessary, because after the noise exterminator is run, the starless image is saved once again as a lossless TIFF, and exported into Photolab 8, where final adjustments are done to brightness, color, and sharpness. In the case of astrophotography, Photolab 8 serves as a finishing tool. It is very good at isolating regions of an image based on factors such as brightness and color, and then they can be specifically adjusted to balance with the rest of the image. It also has some amazingly powerful tools such as Clearview Plus and Micro and Fine Contrast, which, when combined with Photolab 8's own sharpening and unsharp mask tools, can take sharpening refinements even further. But in a sense, the power of Photolab 8 to accomplish these tasks also works against it, because if there was any lingering noise at all left in the images after processing an Affinity photo, development in Photolab 8 will most definitely bring that out, often looking something like glitter scattered throughout an image. But this problem is easily avoided by merging all the visible layers within Affinity Photo into that single new pixel layer, and then running the noise exterminator on it again before exporting to Photolab 8. So in total, the noise exterminator is used 4 times. Once separately on the histogram stretched RGB clone destined to become a star plate, once separately on the histogram stretched RGB master that is destined to become a starless plate, and once separately on the luminance master that is destined to become a histogram stretched starless plate. And whether or not to export to a finishing editor like Photolab 8, because developing can bring out any lingering traces of noise, the denoiser should be used again after layer-based development. But this is all academic without a foundation of adequate integration. Remember, the key to beating noise is integration, integration, and more integration. When you have captured all the structure within the DSO that you want to reveal, and given sufficient integration time so that the quantity of information is rich and dense, and when the surrounding space has lost indications of blotchiness, then you have the foundation to build a good noise-free image. Thank you for watching, and if you have any thoughts, questions, or observations, please leave them in the comments section below. Now, get out there and shoot that sky.